I can't, if I met a guy and he wasn't into karaoke, I couldn't date him. Or at least say that he would get up and even be silly.
There is a quiet truth in Hollywood that rarely gets spoken out loud. Sometimes, the role that turns an actor into a global icon doesn't mark the beginning of a long, celebrated rise, but instead becomes the peak that arrives far too early, reshaping everything that follows. Carrie-Anne Moss is one of those rare cases. For many viewers, she is forever frozen in time as Trinity from The Matrix, a figure moving through a collapsing world with calm precision and almost inhuman control. Yet before that moment defined her, she was, for years, almost completely invisible to mainstream cinema. Born in 1967 in British Columbia, Canada, Moss grew up in Vancouver at a time when the city was not yet the major production hub it would later become. It was a place where television crews came and went, where small roles were constantly being cast, and where most actors built careers that never quite escaped regional work. Her early life had little to do with fame or Hollywood ambition. Like many young performers of her generation, she entered the industry indirectly. In her late teens, Moss worked as a model, traveling across Europe and parts of Asia. Those years were less about building a career and more about survival, independence, and movement, learning how to adapt to unfamiliar places and uncertain work. Acting didn't arrive as a dramatic calling. It came gradually, almost casually, as an extension of experience rather than a defined goal. By the early 1990s, she began appearing in small television roles, the kind that filled schedules but rarely created recognition. Guest appearances, short arcs, and minor characters became her professional foundation. At that stage, there was nothing in her trajectory that suggested global attention. No breakthrough moment, no industry spotlight. Just steady, unremarkable work in a system that produced thousands of similar careers. And yet, hidden inside that quiet beginning, something unpredictable was forming. Something that would soon transform not only her life, but the visual language of modern cinema itself. Before the world ever knew her name, Carrie-Anne Moss was already doing what thousands of actors quietly do in Hollywood's shadow economy, working consistently without being seen. She appeared in television productions like Dark Justice, a series that gave her steady on-set experience but little public attention. These were the kinds of roles that rarely survived beyond their original broadcast, performances designed to fill episodes rather than define careers. What came next followed a similar pattern. Moss joined Models, Inc., a spin-off of the popular Melrose Place universe. On paper, it looked like progress, more exposure, a recognizable franchise, a larger platform. In reality, it was still part of the same invisible system, attractive, professional work that passed quickly through the television landscape without leaving a lasting cultural trace. Alongside television, she moved through a series of low-budget films during the mid-90s. Titles like The Soft Kill, Sabotage, and New Blood kept her active in the industry, but none of them altered her position within it. These were genre films built for cable rotation and home video markets, not for critical attention or long-term recognition. At this stage, Moss was not considered a rising star. She was not being tracked by studios as a future lead. Instead, she was part of a vast middle layer of actors who sustained the industry without ever becoming its face. And yet, this period was not wasted time. It was accumulation of discipline, camera awareness, emotional control, and the ability to adapt to any production environment. Skills that don't show up in headlines, but later define whether an actor can handle something much larger than themselves. Still, nothing in this phase suggested transformation. No one on set could have predicted that this quiet, steady working actress would soon be placed at the center of one of the most influential films ever made. That shift, when it came, did not arrive gradually. It arrived like a rupture. In 1999, everything changed in a way that almost no one involved could have fully anticipated. The Matrix didn't just become a successful film, it became a cultural reset. And at the center of that reset was a woman most audiences had never seen before. Carrie-Anne Moss stepped into the role of Trinity without the weight of a familiar screen identity. That absence turned out to be powerful. There were no previous characters to compare her to, no expectations built from earlier fame. When she appeared on screen, she wasn't an actress playing a role. She felt like she already belonged inside that world. From the very first moments, Trinity is defined by control, precision in movement, calm under pressure, and a kind of emotional restraint that makes her presence feel almost mechanical. Before the audience fully understands the rules of the story, they understand her. She is not reacting to the world. She is operating within it, as if she has already mastered it. The production itself demanded something unusual. The Wachowskis needed an actor who could combine physical discipline with emotional stillness, someone who could sell impossible action without breaking the illusion. Moss delivered that balance with a performance that felt effortless on the surface, yet deeply engineered in execution. When the film was released, its impact spread far beyond cinema. The Matrix reshaped action filmmaking with its slow-motion choreography, digital aesthetics, and philosophical undertones. It influenced video games, fashion, editing styles, and even the way audiences thought about reality on screen. But for Moss, the consequences were more personal and more complex. She didn't just become part of a hit film, she became permanently associated with a global symbol. Trinity wasn't just a character anymore. She became an image that defined an era. And that kind of transformation is not something an actor can easily step away from. Because once a performance becomes iconic at that scale, it doesn't just open doors, it also quietly begins to close others. After The Matrix, Carrie-Anne Moss didn't step into the kind of career Hollywood usually writes for its new icons. Instead, she moved into something far more complicated, living inside the shadow of a role that had already defined a generation. In the early 2000s, she continued working steadily, but the expectations surrounding her had fundamentally changed. Every new project was now measured against Trinity. Audiences didn't just see an actress taking on a role, they saw a comparison, whether it was fair or not. Her performance in Memento revealed a different side of her craft. Smaller, quieter, and more restrained, it showed she wasn't limited to action or intensity. In films like Chocolat and Red Planet, she moved between ensemble drama and mainstream genre cinema, never fully repeating the image that made her famous. Meanwhile, The Matrix sequels expanded her presence within the franchise, but also reinforced a structural shift. Trinity became part of a larger mythology rather than a fully independent emotional center. The scale grew, but the intimacy that first defined her character became harder to maintain. As Hollywood leaned deeper into franchises and spectacle, Moss began to drift toward work that felt more grounded. Television roles, character-driven projects, and later, even voice acting in video games like Mass Effect. It was not a retreat, but a repositioning, and over time a pattern became clear. She wasn't chasing the center of the spotlight anymore. She was choosing the shape of her work more carefully, even if that meant stepping slightly outside the mainstream narrative of stardom. Today, Carrie-Anne Moss stands as an example of a career that refused to follow Hollywood's usual trajectory. Now in her late 50s, she continues to work, but on her own terms, choosing projects that are more intimate, character-driven, and aligned with her current stage of life rather than industry expectations. In recent years, she has returned sporadically to larger franchises, most notably reprising Trinity in The Matrix Resurrections 2021. But instead of relaunching her into another wave of blockbuster dominance, the film felt more like a reflection point, an acknowledgement of a role that defined an era rather than a new beginning. More recently, she has appeared in television projects such as The Acolyte 2024 and smaller films like Die Alone, continuing a steady but selective presence on screen. Outside of acting, Moss has built a life centered strongly around family. She's been married to actor Stephen Roy since 1999, and together they have 3 children. She is now based in the United States, maintaining a relatively private lifestyle compared to many of her contemporaries. There are no headlines of reinvention or public reinvention arcs, just continuity. And perhaps that is the most defining part of her legacy. Carrie-Anne Moss didn't disappear after fame. She simply stepped away from its center, choosing a quieter rhythm, where success is measured less by visibility and more by control over one's own life.